An entitled mother at a Ukrainian beach stumbles onto two creative sociopaths who deal out some sweet revenge. Around the time when I was about 9 or 10, so old enough to develop a spiteful mindset. At the time, me and my family, which included me, my mother, M, my grandmother, GM, and my mother's sister, my aunt, MS. This was during the time when we lived in another country and usually went to the holidays to Ukraine around the Black Sea, which is where this story took place. Every morning, around 8 a.m., we would head towards the beaches, as they were always full and impossibly hot by the time it was midday. So our plan was always, go to the beach and leave by around 11, when it got so hot that you would cook in your own sweat. We would go around the small town surrounding the beach to play games, arcades, and other entertainment, and then go back to our little special personal houses, huts, for rest and lunch. Nevertheless, I digress. So on this particular day, we made it to the beach a little earlier, which meant that we could pick out some of the best parts of the beach and set up our blankets before new amounts of glass and trash were made on the beach. For some background, while the Black Sea is lovely, the beaches around the area are only for the more experienced who know how to avoid the trash areas. Often beaches were full of broken glass bottles, cigarettes, needles, and many other dangerous things, and thus it was highly advised that you wear feet protection when traveling between point A to B. So me and the gal crew, my grandfather rarely ever came to the holidays with us, as my grandparents owned a massive house with farm animals and couldn't trust anyone to take care of them, so someone had to stay back. And my dad is a deadbeat asshole, so it was always just us girls. Now about that spot. We found the perfect spot and laid out our things and towels and checked for any bottles or debris, and were rejoiced to find none. We watched the beach fill up with people, and eventually around 10-ish, we noticed that a very large woman with 3 kids approached us. Now the girls in my family are big, but this was a hippo of unbelievable proportions. We were in a spot right between the sea and the entrance, under a big umbrella that was there for public use. She towered over us. There were lots of people around, but still a few spaces available around to sit nearby, which was very surprising. This woman towered over us and loudly groaned and complained. Let's refer to her as EM, and her kids, EK1, EK2, and EK3, all 3 boys. EM, you are in our spot, she yelled loudly. All of us blinked unanimously in confusion. My mom even started laughing a little, asking, "Are you having a heat stroke, or are you for real?" EM loudly gasped and started kicking our towels and stuff. "You are in our spot. We have been sitting here for the last 3 days, and now your fat asses are taking my spot. And because of you, my kids are burning their feet waiting for you cows to move," she yelled. My mother's sister had burst into laughter, replying, "Well, whoever the cow in this scenario is, it's definitely not us." Odd translation, I know, but it is direct. No kto uje karova zdis, tak eto nemi. While this was happening, I was building a small sand pile. Her devil spawn suddenly started pushing me and taking some of my sandcastle stuff and bending it, to which I got up and pushed him away and grabbed my shovel and then hit him with it, telling him to bugger off. Hitting him repeatedly and hard. I was usually a well-behaved kid, but if I have ever seen anyone try and break my stuff, I would cripple them, as we weren't the richest, and I was protective over my things. The mother gasped and started crying out for me to move, which everyone in the surrounding area glanced at, but it's Ukraine, noon cares. I love my people, and beside there was noon to call for help. Police or guards around the beach are not common or wanted. My mother has stood up fully to her now and told her, "Take your fat," we have a better word, joipa, which means fat, hippo ass in one word, and ugly ass somewhere else before the 5 of us collectively will cripple you. She straight up tries to slap my mother, to which I then responded and took a plastic shovel to her son's eye with sand in it and start jabbing it, as his sibling try and push me away, but I spit in one's face and kick the other. All start crying, and a few people shut out for her to shut her brats up. The mother then stops midway and grabs her spawns and yells at us, "The second you bitches move, I'm taking this spot." I know there were a few more profanities, but I don't remember every word fully, or the conversation fully. Now mind you, there was noon to call help for, as the lifeguards were not evenly spaced out and miles away, so we decide to have a miniature revenge. My mother tries to tell me of for assaulting the boys, but my grandmother defends me and said something along the times of, Don't be mad at her, she was defending you. To which we all then agreed to forget and have fun. Now me and my mother's sisters were a lot closer to being siblings than her and my mother. She was about 10 years older than me, so she was like 19 when I was 9. We went swimming in turns, never leaving the towel and out stuff never unattended. After about 40 minutes, my mother and grandmother tells us to pack things up as they were going to get one last dip as we had ours. So me and MS realize we have a window of opportunity, the revenge. While taking their last dip, me and MS see that the entitled mother is eyeing our spot, and we had an idea. MS was just as petty-minded and asshole-minded. MS told me to and have a quick look around for broken bottles in the area, and I knew exactly what she was planning. She told me not to touch them by hand and use my shovel and my little claw pickup. I took my bucket and my spatula and started running around for about 15 minutes while she packed everything, and I started picking up glass shards and bottle shards with my spatula and all the cigarette and all the discussing thigh I could find, which was not hard. I piled them into the bucket. I then ran back to my aunt, and she saw the bucket full. She told me to be careful and make sure that Noon was watching, or cared enough to. This wasn't the first Ponzi scheme, revenge plot, and act of disturbing punishment we have done, so I knew what to do. We knew that my mom and grandmother would still take a long time. Turning our backs towards the EM, MS started to take out the glass shards and bottles, and me and her started spreading them around that specific area, as this was not uncommon for people top-bury their trash, so Noon paid mind to it. We started slightly burying them from visibility, the sharp way up, and engulfed that whole area as much as we could, while making it look like we were building a sandcastle. My aunt told me to come pick up grandmother and my mom, as we saw them getting out of the sea and drying, and she told me to take them around a slightly different route, so that they wouldn't step on our little bubby trap. I watched her get up, and the entitled mother almost pushed her out of the way, and yelled at her to move, to which she just smiled, and told her to have a lovely day as the 5 of us cross-met. We slowly started to head a little bit away, and my aunt stops midway, where there are less people to put on a few things and stall for time so we could watch. I saw the entitled mother hastily punting the tower over the sand, without checking it, big mistake, and slops her fat ass down to only then yell and howls in pain, as she had sat also directly onto the broken glass shards that we hid, cutting up her towel and her leg and thigh entirely. One of the brats who had also tried to break my things, stepped onto shards and cut his foot, by the looks and sounds of it, and started yelling and crying and breaking down, and the woman yelled in pain. A few people started being inconvinced by her, and others checked out what happened and tried to help, but the woman screamed profanities. She started rolling around, and all the cigarette buds and seaweed that we had also placed about started coming on her wound and skin, her towel and her things, and engulfs her in trash and all the things that people would be collecting in biohazard suits. My grandmother was horrified, thinking that we were also sitting on this by my other looked at the 2 of us, knowing we did this. She could not say a word and started shoving us away from the beach in a hurry to get out. Me and MS started laughing as my grandmother said, "Oh, praise the Lord that we didn't get cut like that woman and that it was the grace of God that saved us." Me and MS just continued laughing as my mother took us to the side and told us of. My mom threatened to punish me, usually by shaking me hard, yelling at me as she couldn't ground me on a holiday. But MS took the blame, as told me it was worth it. We sat down in a cafe to get us some cold drinks and lunch, and only after about an hour and a half, we saw a few paramedics started coming towards the beach, by maybe around 1 p.m/2 p.m. The medical care in Ukraine on holiday locations is piss poor, and the only way you'd get a doctor helping you, if you are dying, if that. It was also dead heat of the day to the medical paramedics would be too lazy to go onto the beach, and Noon came to help until the sun came down. There was a dude who got tangled in a parachute and help arrive only and 1 hour and a half later. It was safe to assume that it was for the entitled mother. That was a satisfying moment as we had realized this woman was basically rolling in a CS pool of illnesses for at least 1/2 hours before any help arrived, baking under +35 sun. We have most likely ruined this woman's holiday and have most likely put her out of commission for a long time, as those bottles and that hazardous sand and cigarette pits would have definitely given her an infection, or at least seriously made it worse. Paramedics and doctors also need bribes there, so this help would have probably cost her €500 in bribes only, without the cost of any treatment. There are no cameras around, no people who cared, and no proof that we strikely did it, and no way of ever finding us. Hopefully next time that cow learns some manners. Lesson of the story is that don't pick a fight with someone, and underestimate their mindsets, cause you may just stumble onto sociopaths who will get back at you for being such a delight. Give me a heads up if you want to head about some of the other Ponzi schemes and Count of Monte Cristo revenge stories that me and my aunt have dished out over the years. When you grow up without the internet and only part-time cable TV, you find alternative entertainment procedures, which mostly revolve around making a crappy person's day even crappier.